Welcome to Story Time with Chris James. Now I will be reading UFOs Attack the Bag Company. This is book number 9 in this ongoing series. I started this book in 2019 and I didn't finish it until 2022. It took a while. I just couldn't seem to get the story down, so it took a while. Hope you enjoyed the last adventure. This one picks up right where that one left off. Chapter 1. This is weird. Sam Cassavetes wanted nothing better than to head back to the house and sleep. But life on a farm, any farm, meant getting up early and attending to all the chores. Chores that sometimes took all day and some parts of the night. Things like feeding the cows and milking the same cows and cleaning up after the cows, fixing things that the cows had broken. Sam was beginning to think there had to be an easier way in life. This had all been his wife's idea. "Let's buy a farm," she said. "It will be fun," she said. "We can raise our own food," she'd said. One thing Sam learned real quick: if you were raising cattle for food, you didn't give them names. It wasn't right to be eating old Bobby or young Pete. Sam had bought a bunch of cattle to fatten up and sell. Then his wife had gone and named each one. The pet cows were now standing around the field eating and producing lots of the one of three things that cattle produced a lot of. Cattle don't actually produce meat, they are meat. Cassie, that was his wife, had gone and made a collar for each cow. Some had little bells, while others had shiny studs, looking like a bunch of overgrown cats. It had been Sam's idea to buy the cow shower thing. Having close contact with a bunch of cows all day, Sam had noticed how the air had taken on a very foul aroma. It didn't take long to realize the source of the smell had been the cows. Giving each one of them a bath had taken all week, so Sam looked online and found a bovine grooming machine. It looked like an automatic car wash. The cows did look kind of fluffy once they exited the hair drying station. In the back of the barn was all the equipment needed to make cheese. If only the cows would produce more milk so he could get around to making something to bring in cash into his business. To date, the cows had produced enough for one wheel of cheddar. The fence was messed up, so Sam had to drive out to the field and set a new fence post. Then he had to stretch the barbed wire without any barbs across the new post and attach it. You might ask why on earth he was using barbed wire without any barbs. Once again, this was Cassie's idea. "The poor cows will hurt themselves on those nasty sharp wire thingies," she'd said. "The poor cows," she kept saying. So Sam had replaced all the wire fencing with cow-friendly wire. Cow-friendly wire only was a suggestion to the cows to stay on their side of the fence. The grass being greener on the other side of the fence the cows were not occupying tended to lead to cows breaking the fence to get to that so delicious looking green stuff. The last staple was hammered into place. As Sam put the wire stretcher and the fence pliers back in the toolbox and closed the lid. He looked down at his shadow that stretched out away from his feet. This is weird." Sam looked at his watch. It was already going on 9 p.m. The sun had set a while ago. He turned and he looked for the source of the light. There in the trees, just a few feet into the woods, something was glowing. It looked like it was coming from the next field over. It was a kind of a reddish green color. No, it was red, and then it was green. Sam stood there for a few seconds trying to figure out what he was looking at. Oh man, I hope that ain't a fire. Sam weighed his options. He could drive back home, call the authorities, tell them there just might be a fire in the next field over, or he could drive over and have a look. Beauregard sat in the truck waiting to see what Sam would do next. He wagged his tail in case Sam didn't realize he was ready for action. Or not, depending on what was going to happen next. "Woof!" he said, to make sure Sam knew he was there. "What do you think I should do, Bo?" "Well, I think we should head back home and see what's for dinner," Bo said, but Sam only heard him say, "Woof, woof, grr, slurp, slurp." "You're right. Best go see what's going on at Jake's place." Beauregard looked at Sam as if to say that was a very bad idea. "Dinner would be a better idea," he said, but only whimper, whimper came out. There was a gate that needed to be opened and then closed again after driving through. The gravel road wound around a bit, but as he got closer, the light didn't seem any brighter. Maybe it's some poachers looking to shoot a deer or 10. Sam wished his shotgun wasn't back home above the fireplace. "I really should keep that thing close, just in case." Beauregard said, "I told you this morning you should bring your boomstick, only rough, rough, bark, whine came out." Sam stopped his pickup next to the fence. The light was on the other side of the fence, down in a creek bed. Sam looked around as if hoping there was a gate nearby. Shoot, have to do this the hard way. He considered trying to crawl under the bottom wire. This was a real barbed wire fence with real barbs on it. His neighbor didn't have to worry about fence breaking cattle either. Sam got his foot up on the second strand of the wire and put his weight down. The wire made a creaking sound as it took his weight. He threw his other leg up over the top wire and managed to get on the other side without tearing his pants. "Hey, Bo, you coming?" Bo looked at the light and tried to roll the window up. His paws wouldn't work the window crank. "Okay, stay there. I'll be right back." Sam walked into the trees. The ground was hard. With the sun having gone down, it was getting colder by the minute. Sam zipped his jacket up and felt in his pocket for his gloves. As he walked through the trees, he thought he could hear a humming sound. It was just loud enough to make out. That's when he realized the bugs and the animals had all gone silent. "This is weird." Sam moved around a small cluster of pines and stopped. There, in a small clearing, sat a huge, glowing spaceship. What on earth? Sam felt in his pockets for his cell phone. Even though he was too far from any cell tower, the camera would still work. Too bad Art Bell isn't around. I could get on his show for sure. Sam began clicking photos of the saucer. There was a snap as something heavy stepped on a stick. Sam turned and looked over his shoulder. There, just a few feet away, stood a huge metal monster. It came towards him. Cassie had just put the vegetarian meatloaf out on the oven. I know it's not meatloaf without any meat, but that's what it was called. She was about to get the plates down when she heard barking and whining coming from outside. "Ah, Sam must be back." She set the things on the table, getting ready for dinner. There was a bang at the door, followed by loud whining and scratching. "Let me in! They're trying to kill us all!" Bo yelled at the door, but all Cassie heard was whine, whine, bark, bark, bark. Thinking there must be something wrong, Cassie opened the door. Bo threw Bo flew through the opening and made a mad dash for the bedroom. He slid on the hardwood floor as he barreled into the room and slid under the bed. "What's wrong, boy? Did Timmy fall in a well?" Cassie looked at the doorway to the bedroom. Bo was well out of sight. Crazy dog. Cassie looked out at the driveway where Sam's truck should be parked. "This is weird," she said. When Sam hadn't arrived after an hour, Cassie got on the phone and called Bridget, her neighbor. Bridget told her husband Jake to go have a look for Sam since their farms butted up against each other. 15 minutes later, Cassie called the sheriff. Jake had found Sam's pickup sitting next to his fence, but Sam was nowhere to be seen. Chapter 2, January 7th. Pam wanted to stay in bed until noon, but the sunlight coming through her window had other ideas. She put her pillow over her head, but that only made it hard to breathe. It had been a long week, and Pam felt she deserved a small respite from the day-to-day action and adventure of being chased by zombies and killer mummies, not to mention the mad doctor. A doctor as in Ph.D. Dr. Ibebad was hopefully going to be a resident of the county lockup for the next few years. Or would it be the state lockup? Pam was hit by a sudden thought. Was it Saturday or Sunday? She tried to think. The first of the year had been, was it a Sunday or a Monday? If it had been a Sunday, then Pam had a whole weekend to relax and recover. If it had been on a Monday, then she had today, and that was it. Monday, she had to go back to school. Pam finally found her cell phone and looked at the date. It was Sunday. She had better get going, or her mother would come drag her out of bed and away to church, still in her pajamas. It wouldn't be the first time, and Pam was intent on not making the same mistake more than a dozen times. She had heard more than one person refer to her as Pajama Pam at their church. She went to brush her teeth and see about maybe getting her hair into something other than the mess that it was. There was a pile of linen bandages on the floor of the bathroom. The mummy wrappings were dirty and should be thrown away. Pam had ridden all the way home dressed in her mummy bride costume. The wig did help her sleep since it covered her eyes, but sleeping in the back seat of a moving vehicle wasn't all that restful. She'd been too tired to change, and all of her clothes were either torn or missing. It had taken a pair of scissors and some time to get out of the linen strips last night. Surprisingly, neither her mom nor her dad had said anything about her appearance when she walked through the door last night. Maybe they were both overwhelmed, or they were getting used to her appearing in various weird costumes. Pam got dressed and looked more human, then made her way downstairs. Her parents were sitting at the table, looking at her. Paula started. "So, how was your trip?" Uh, the usual." Pam looked from one to the other. "Long drive, lots of traffic." She considered mentioning her wedding and almost getting killed. Not much. I stole someone's truck, nearly got sacrificed. Better not say that." "And the mummy costume?" her dad asked. Oh, we all dressed up and we went to a casino in Oklahoma. Well, that was the truth, as far as that went. Al gave Pam a contented look, and as if this was good enough. Paula gave her one and only child a look that said, "That sounds like a lot of hooey to me." Al looked at his watch. "That time to go." He got up and headed for the door. After church, Pam wanted to relax and not do anything. Tomorrow she had to go back to school. She was just about to sit on the couch when her phone rang. The caller ID gave a number Pam didn't recognize. She thought it was probably some telemarketer wanting to sell her something. She considered not hitting the answer button even as her finger hit the button. Hello? Howdy. Is this Pamela Bogus, the paranormal investigator? The woman on the phone sounded unsure of herself. Yes, this is me, or rather, yes, this is Pam. Pam thought how bad this sounded. Since no longer working at the receptionist desk at work, she was out of practice sounding professional on the phone. The woman went on. This is Cassie Cassavetes. A detective gave me your number." There was a long pause. A very long pause. Pam began to think maybe Mrs. Cassavetes had hung up or maybe passed out. What if she'd had a heart attack? What was Pam gonna do? Uh, ma'am? I'm just not used to talking to people who don't believe in strange things. My Sam was. That was what attracted us to one another. We both love strange things. We listened to all the podcasts late at night. He was always going on about werewolves and zombies and things. More of that long pause. Pam asked, "So how?" "My Sam went out to mend the fences and take care of our cows. That would be old Bobby and young Pete and the others. They stay out in the north pasture during the day. Well, he never came home. I got worried when Bridget's husband Jake went to see about him. He found his pickup. That would be Jake. Went to look for Sam, my Sam, and found his pickup. That would be Sam's pickup, sitting by the side of the fence between our field and theirs." Pam tried again. Ma'am, would you mind calling? The next morning, when Sam hadn't come home, I called the sheriff's office and asked them if maybe they had heard or seen anything. The sheriff sent a deputy out to have a look. Then the deputy did some of the things deputies do when looking for people. Long pause. "This morning I received a call from the sheriff. It was odd, being a Sunday morning and all. Normally the sheriff doesn't work on Sundays. He's a very religious man. Him and his family always observe the Sabbath." Pam was beginning to think maybe she should just hang up. This was not an option because of what her mother had told her on more than one occasion. Her mom's face appeared in the back of her mind, telling her to listen to your elders, no matter how crazy they might be. This had something to do with her aunt, who was known for her loose grasp on reality. Her mom's voice filled her head. "Someday you'll be old and crazy, too." Gee, thanks. Pam slammed a hand over her mouth. Was that out loud? It's not as if criminals observe the Sabbath. Or do they? Just a short pause this time. "So, as I was saying, he called this morning, that would be the sheriff, and told me that a friend of his, some guy named Mark Salat, had given him your number." Pam heard the name and thought hard about it. Ever since returning from the Mall of Doom, she'd found thinking wasn't as hard as she had thought. Mark Salat? No, no, it's Mark Slot. He's a detective here in town. "Oh, that makes more sense." Cassie took a shorter pause. So the sheriff said, he said, let's see, I wrote it down here somewhere. Oh, yes, the sheriff said SO doesn't do paranormal. That would be the sheriff's department. SO means sheriff's office. And Pam was getting more intrigued than annoyed. Then the sheriff said that his friend, the guy in your city, gave him your number. The sheriff, that is. Just for a second, Pam wished she were speaking to her uncle instead of this woman. Uh, so how can I help you? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? He's been abducted by aliens. Oh, Pam found this last statement just a bit beyond her normal form of paranormal. Just a bit. So, what do you need from the bag? Carrie didn't wait. Cassie didn't wait at all this time. I want you to find those aliens and make them give my Sam back. Pam had no idea how to get a hold of aliens. She considered calling the Border Patrol, but decided that might be the wrong kind of alien. She tried looking online and found that there were over 3 million hits to look through. Pam did her best to come up with a solution. What would World Leader Pam have done? Pam thought back to her time in the Mall of Doom. She'd call the government and get them on the case. This sounded like something World Leader Pam would do, but way beyond regular Pam's abilities. Then she remembered Agent Smith. I have his card here somewhere. Pam pulled her wallet out and opened it. There was her ATM card, her driver's license, her library card, and her school ID. No business cards. Next, Pam pulled out her official bogus anomalous group ID. It came in a handy dandy fake leather wallet with what looked like a badge embossed on the front. If you looked closely at it, actually an elongated image of the Mayan calendar. Behind her picture ID was Agent Smith's business card. It said John Smith, SSS, and the address. There was no phone number or web address. It was Sunday, a Sunday afternoon. What were the odds the government building would even be open? It wasn't that far to the downtown part of town, and she just remembered someone at school, one of the teachers, or was it someone else, had said, be sure to bring some B-cell batteries for class? Or was it something else? Pam flipped a mental coin and actually managed to catch it this time. Mom, I gotta go for a drive. Pick up some things for class. Anything you need while I'm out? Paula got a thinking look on her face. Could you pick up some cabbage? I'm trying a new recipe for pizza I got from Mr. Chavez. Okay, I'll be. Pam got to wondering who Mr. Chavez was. Then she got to thinking, something she was doing a lot of here lately. Would that be Eddie Chavez, Mr. Techno from work? That's him. He gave me his recipe for pizza, and I gave him mine for rice and beans. Paula gave Pam a smile. Pam felt a cold shudder run through her body. Two things that did not go together, pizza and cabbage. Not even a tiny bit. Okay, I'll see what I can find. Or not. As Pam walked out the door, she felt very guilty about planning to forget to pick up the cabbage. Pam drove into the downtown area and then over to City Hall. I wonder if the mayor's turned up yet. Ever since the mayor had tried to kill Pam and Belle just before the swarm of parasites that were driving him to a life of crime, other than politics, and murder, were sucked up into a. Just go back and read the Christmas horror story, or listen to it. The mayor was still missing. Oddly enough, the city was running much smoother without his hand on the helm, and none of the city workers had bothered to report him missing. Around the corner was the Federal Building. This was where the FBI and the VA, as well as the Social Insecurity, had their offices. Across the street was a nondescript building. This was where the Secret Science Service had their offices. Pam looked at the parking lot and saw that there were several cars in it. None of them had government plates, but then being a secret government agency, would they have government plates? She parked as close to the front door as she could get, and then walked over to the tiny glass doors. Twin glass doors. She'd never actually been inside. She'd only met Agent Smith here one time, and that had been in the parking lot. Pam looked at the dark tinted glass. There was no sign saying what hours the building was open. There was no sign saying if the building was even open. Pam gave the door a pull and it swung open. Just inside was a second set of doors. To her right was a window. It looked like a receptionist should be on the other side, so Pam went to tap on the glass. The glass slid to one side as soon as her knuckles were about to contact it. The man on the other side was dressed in desert camouflage. His hair was cut very short. There was no patches or insignias anywhere. He had a shoulder holster with a pistol in it. Pam gave him her best friendly smile. Howdy, sir. I'm looking for Agent Smith. She tried to hold the smile, even though the guard only scowled back. Which one? We have several Smiths. His eyes scanned around the lobby as if somebody might be hiding behind Pam's legs. Um, Agent Smith with the SSS? Pam pulled his card out of her wallet and showed it to the guard. The guard looked at Pam's ID and then the card. Then he looked out the front door to be sure nobody was trying to sneak in. 1 minute. The glass slid shut. Pam fought the urge to check her watch. She knew it had been a longer than a minute, but didn't want to look as if she were counting. The glass window slid open. Step through the doors. There was a buzzing sound. Pam grabbed the handle and pulled. The door swung open, so Pam stepped through and stopped. Just inside the door was a security checkpoint. There was a metal detector to walk through. Red velvet ropes showed her where she could walk to, even though it was obvious since the metal detector filled the narrow hallway. 3 soldiers or security guys were looking at her as if she might be trying to steal something. Having been through something like this before, Pam pulled her wallet out and handed over her driver's license. Then she pulled everything out of her pockets and placed them in a plastic basket to be run through the X-ray machine. Cell phone, one of the guards said. I left it in my truck. Pam tried to smile again, but it went nowhere. You left your cell phone in your truck? The guard looked as if this was unthinkable for any young girl to do. The 3 guards looked at each other. One said, "A teenager without her cell phone? That sounds suspicious to me." The other nodded. "Step through," one indicated the metal detector. Pam walked through the device. As she was halfway through, a guard told her to stop. She felt tingly all over. The guard was intently looking at the screen on her side of the metal detector. She turned a knob and looked at another screen. She then turned to the last guard and nodded. "Okay, step out," the last guard said. Pam stepped out of the machine and the tingling went away. "Stand here." The 3rd guard pointed to the floor next to him. Pam stepped over beside the guard and waited. "Look forward, no smiling." Pam looked at what looked like a blank screen on the wall. Something went click. Hand, the guard said. Pam held out her hand and he grabbed it. He pulled on her hand and held it over a glass plate mounted on the desktop. A light went on and then off, and something beeped. A machine made a whirring sound, and a piece of paper popped out of a slot. Here is your pass. It must remain visible at all times. If you lose it, there will be consequences. He handed the pass to Pam. Pam took the pass and looked at it. It was about 6 by 4 inches. There was her picture, looking as if she were looking at the wall. Her fingerprint was halfway over the lower part of the photo. Along the bottom edge of the pass was what looked like a barcode. Put it here. The guard pointed to his chest, just above his heart. Pam noticed the paper had a sticky backing. She peeled this off and found the back of the ID was indeed sticky. She pressed the pass to her shirt. Come with me. A guy in a suit had walked up behind Pam as she was dealing with her pass. Even though they were inside, he was wearing a pair of dark glasses. He turned and began walking down the hallway. Pam followed. I'm trying to get a hold of. We know who you're here to see. Our records indicate you've been dealing with Agent Smith on a regular basis. I wouldn't say it's been a regular basis. It's only been twice. Pam had to walk fast to keep up. Her escort turned a corner and pushed a button for an elevator. The door opened and they stepped inside. There were no buttons, but her escort placed his hand over a glass mounted on the side of the elevator, began to move. They went up 1 floor. The door opened onto a corridor with doors on each side, and nothing was marked. How do you know which office belongs to who? Nothing is marked. Pam gave her escort her best smile. We know, was all he said. Somewhere along the hall he stopped in front of a white door and knocked twice. Then he opened the door and indicated Pam should go in. The door was closed behind her. Agent Smith was sitting behind a desk. There were 2 computer screens facing him. The wall held a lot of framed certificates that said someone had been to a lot of places, mostly training or missions or stuff. Pam looked at them and noticed the places where the names went were all blank. Behind him was a camera mounted on the wall up in the corner. It was aimed right at her. Agent Smith pointed his hand towards a chair. Pam took the initiative and sat. So, Miss Bogus, I wasn't expecting you. He clicked a few buttons on his computer. No, I don't see where we asked you to come in. He gave Pam a look that implied she might be doing something illegal. I came by because I needed to ask you guys a question. Pam looked up at the camera and smiled. Agent Smith looked at Pam as if she were crazy. We are not in the business of answering questions. We are here to do national security work. He said national security as if it needed to be all in capitals with a few exclamation marks. He then looked over his shoulder. There was nobody there, only a window with the blinds closed. Pam tried to channel her inner world leader, Pam. Well, a man has gone missing, and his wife thinks he was abducted by aliens, the ones from outer space. I wasn't sure who to ask, so I came to you. She tried her best. Do as I ask, look. Agent Smith picked up the desk phone and punched in some numbers. He waited just a few seconds, and then he said, It's the bogus girl. Yes, she's asking questions. I disagree. Are you sure that's a good idea? He looked at the wall behind Pam as if somebody had come in behind her. Pam felt uneasy, so she turned and looked over her shoulder. There, high on the wall, was a second camera, which was aimed at Agent Smith. He continued, "What do you mean he likes her? No, I'm not questioning your authority. If you say so." He scowled at the camera behind her. "How do we know she won't talk?" Agent Smith looked like he was madder than usual. "I'll need that in writing." "Yes, yes, no." He hung up. Agent Smith sat back in his chair and looked at the wall behind Pam. Pam did her best act of relaxing. Her foot was shaking. She tried to not squirm in her chair. "If this is an inconvenience," Agent Smith held up his hand to convey the idea that she shouldn't talk. There was a knock on the door, followed by it opening. The same guy who'd led her to this office came in. The guy handed a piece of paper to Agent Smith. He then held out a clipboard. Agent Smith signed something, and the suit guy tore a copy off and handed it to Agent Smith, who got busy checking the wording of the paper he'd just received. When he was done, Agent Smith placed the paper on the corner of his desk along with the receipt. Pam did her best to not try to read the upside down document. She didn't really have to try. The words were all way too small and they were upside down. "So what was it you wanted to ask us?" Agent Smith looked as if his face was trying to smile. It looked as sincere as any politician's smile. "I wanted to know who I could talk to in order to find out who has Mr. Cassavetes." Pam thought about it. And get him back in one piece and still alive." Agent Smith grabbed the paper and read it once more. He looked from Pam to the camera behind her and then back at the paper. Pam thought she could hear him grinding his teeth. "I will have someone contact you soon." He did some more of that smiling that looked so bad. "Well, thank you. I look forward to whoever it is." Pam held out her hand to shake. Agent Smith looked at her hand. He looked at her. Then he looked at the camera behind her. He finally shook her hand. Pam stood and turned to the door. That's when she saw there was no doorknob. "How do you—" There was a knock at the door, and it swung open. Mr. Suit and Sunglasses was there to collect her. "This way." He never bothered to look at Agent Smith, and Agent Smith never looked at him. They walked down the corridor and back to the elevator. It was opened, and they went down to the first floor. Pam felt like saying something, so she did. Do you guys always work on Sunday?" "We work when it's needed," the suit guy said without looking at her. "Is security always this tight?" She tried to act cool. "No, we've actually relaxed considerably the last year or two." Pam didn't want to even contemplate what this place was like before. Once they got to the entry, Pam was about to walk out. "Stop, face the wall," one guard said. Pam looked at the same blank screen, and it went click. "Hand," he said. Pam held out her hand, and he placed it over the glass panel. The machine went ping. This made the guard relax a bit, and he held out one hand. Pam looked at his hand for a second, and then said, "Oh, yes, my pass." She peeled the piece of paper off the front of her shirt and handed it over. The guard grabbed it and dropped it into a round opening on the desk. Flames shot up, and the pass was no more. The guard folded his arms and looked at Pam. "I guess we're done here, huh?" Pam looked at the guards, who all looked back. "Okay, I'll see you guys around." She walked to the door and out to the fresh air. It was all she could do to not run for her truck. Oh, that was just too weird. Pam walked around the grocery store with a head of cabbage. She looked everywhere for B cell batteries. After checking all of the usual places, like the battery shelves and electronic shelves and the appliance shelves, she decided it was time to ask someone. Excuse me, where would I find D cell batteries? She asked the guy in an apron. He was also wearing a tie, so he might have been the manager. Seashell pasta. It's on aisle 9, he said, pointing towards the other side of the store. No, I'm looking for seashell. She said seashell, not B cell. The guy pointed to the far wall. Your teacher said to bring a bag of seashell pasta and a jar of barbecue sauce. It's for home ec class. Pam looked at the guy with a question on her face. Was he psychic? Should she offer him a job? Okay, one more time. No one works for the bogus anomalous company except for Techno Chavez, who runs the coffee shop, Hildy, who holds down a chair in reception, and Grandy Sear, who sees dead people but works as the maintenance man. All the psychics and sort of psychics and fake psychics, as well as all the other folks who have offices at the office, are self employed. The bag company holds out their taxes and insurance because if not, most of the gang would be in jail by now. Just as Pam was about to say something to the guy, he continued. 6 girls came in here looking for B cell batteries and barcode saws. He rolled his eyes so hard Pam could hear the tendons stretching. One finally called your teacher and asked. There's no such thing as B cell batteries or barcode saws. Barbecue is what you need, as in barbecue sauce. Yes? He gave Pam a smile. Home ec? Batteries? You want pasta and sauce. Oh, okay, thanks. Pam was about to go when she had a thought. Why aren't there any B cell batteries? The guy in the apron just laughed and said, for the same reason there are no A cells. Then he walked away. Pam turned towards the right aisle when the question popped into her head. Why did one of her classmates have Miss Sandtiger's phone number? There was no one around to ask her, so Pam went to the sauce aisle to look for barbecue sauce, wondering why. The cabbage pizza was actually kind of good if you scraped the cabbage off and ignored the squishy bits. Pam made sure there was nothing left so Paula couldn't put the leftovers in her lunch for tomorrow. She waited at the table for her folks to walk to the kitchen before slipping from her chair. She carefully opened the garage door and moved to the garbage can. Opening her shirt, she dropped handfuls of greasy cabbage into the plastic container. With plans of getting up early so she could prepare for the first day of class, Pam headed off to bed. Pam awoke with a start. Something had interrupted her dreams. Was it a sound? A movement? Was the monster hiding in the closet finally coming to get her? Pam listened for any sound. She tried to force her hearing to work harder. The only sound she could hear was the pounding of her heart. She slowly opened one eye to try looking around her room. Well, the guest room. Pam was still using the guest room until either she moved back into her own bedroom or declared this one to be hers. It had only been 6 months since she had been moved, so she felt it wasn't time yet. Having distracted herself thinking about things from the past, Pam was startled when she saw the closet door swing open. With her heart pounding twice as hard, she watched as something moved from the dark of the closet into the dark of the bedroom. There were several somethings. It looked like a whole gang of monsters were coming to get her. Pam tried to scream. It wasn't that she was scared. Well, actually, she was. She just thought a good, wholehearted scream was the best way to alert her dad to come running, hopefully with a gun or two, maybe his shotgun, or better yet, his machine gun. Well, she just wanted him to come, and quickly, and armed. Having faced all manner of monsters, zombies, man-eating worms, ghosts, vampires, werewolves, demons, and poultrygeist, uh, Pam was well past her scared little girl phase. Right now, she felt like a scared big girl who very much needed rescuing. She let out with a squeak. The shadows moved towards her. Pam decided to spring into action. She would jump out of bed and make a run for it. Her body refused to cooperate. The shadows grew closer. Pam tried to move her arms. Her arms were not in the mood to do anything. This was so much like when Dr. Ibibad was going to remove all of her internal organs and that nasty necklace was holding her down. The shadows split into two groups. Half moved to one side of the bed, while the others took up positions between her and the door. The shadows were now visible in the gloom. They all had huge heads attached to little bitty bodies. As she lay there, unable to move, Pam watched as one held out some kind of a wand. The covers flipped back on their own. Then Pam began to float up off the mattress. She felt relieved. Ah, this is just a dream, nothing to get scared about. She could feel the cold air as it slipped in through the material of her pajamas. Nope, not a dream. I can feel, so it's not a dream. The shadow moved back towards the closet door. Pam drifted along with them, held up by energy from the wand. As she was being moved into the closet, her head hit the doorframe. Ow! She yelled, but her voice was lost inside her head, which now hurt. The closet door slammed shut. Paula sat up with a start. What was that? She asked the form next to her. Al opened one eye. I didn't say anything. Oh, it must have been a dream. Paula laid back down. See ya. Pam thought her closet had gotten awful big here lately. It was the size of a very big operating room. Come to think of it, this was an operating room. Pam sat up. The room was lit from some unknown location. She could see, but there was no source of light. She was sitting on top of a metal table that was very cold to the parts of her that were in contact with it. There was a table with weird-looking instruments that could either be doctor's tools or torture devices. Standing just a few feet away were a group of creatures she'd once seen on Ancient Aliens. These must be the Greys everybody kept talking about. Pam wanted to faint, but decided that was not the best course of action. Her head was spinning, but that might have been from hitting the doorframe. The Greys all looked at Pam as if she were some kind of a scientific experiment. This caused Pam to think about all the TV shows she'd seen where people talked about being abducted by aliens. Things were done to them that sounded very unpleasant. She tried looking for an escape route. Looking over her shoulder, it dawned on her that she could move. Maybe she should make the most of this and run. Ah, you're awake. Good. It's time to talk. Pam turned and saw two tall people with long blonde hair. They looked normal to Pam, only they were dressed like characters from an old 60s sci-fi movie. As there were two more moving towards Pam, as these two moved towards Pam, the Greys all got out of the way and then left the room. Am I glad to see you two? For a minute there, I thought I was about to be examined by those aliens. Pam was about to hop off the table when she realized how tall these two were. They both looked to be well over 7 feet. Those aliens, as you call them, are simply our workers, like drones. They only do what we tell them. This sounded like it came from the female because Pam saw her lips move, but the words didn't quite match up. Okay, then you're not going to be. Pam didn't get to finish. We believe you should have been expecting our visit, the male said. We are the people that your people refer to as the Nordics, although we don't know why. He said this as if it were a profound statement. Pam did some of that thinking she was getting good at. Oh, you mean you were contacted by the SSS? She looked at the blank stares of the two aliens. Secret Science Service? More blank looks. Agent Smith? Yes, your agent Smith called and said you had a question in need of answering. The male of the two began to look Pam up and down as if he thought he might recognize her. Is your name Mercy Brown? He took a step back. The female looked from him to her, and then she joined him farther away. She looked back at Pam with what looked like concern on her face, even though she had shown no emotions. It must have been her eyes, a Betty Davis kind of thing. Pam tried to look friendly. No, my name is. She was cut off. The female said, I'll bet she's Elizabeth Bathory. She looked like she would enjoy a good torturing or two. Pam was shocked, then concerned. Did she say torture? Pam was pretty sure she'd used her inside her head voice. Perhaps we should call in the clones. Let them deal with her, the male said. 10 Greys came running in and began to surround Pam. Pam rushed to introduce herself. My name is Pam Bogus, and I'm looking for information in regards to the disappearance of Sam Cassavetes. His wife is concerned. Pam felt her pajamas trying to find Pam felt along her pajamas trying to find the photograph that Cassie had given her. Of course, it wasn't in any of the pockets her outfit didn't have. She looked at the two tall aliens. You should know this. You sent your creatures to abduct me. She thought a bit more. And I'm not a vampire, or a werewolf, or a zombie. The female looked at Pam and then snapped her fingers. The Greys all left the room as quickly as they had come in. As the last one went out the door, the two blondes began looking as if they relaxed without showing any emotions. They looked back and forth as if having a conversation, and then they turned to Pam. It's just that on occasion we've sent out our workers down to bring us a subject, and they've slipped up, brought us the wrong one. They both seemed to shudder without moving a muscle. We don't want any more vampires running loose up here. Last time it was a nightmare. Pam jumped down from the table so her backside could thaw out a bit. The air was kind of cold, and she was wearing her pajamas, which did little to keep her warm. This made Pam feel a bit underdressed. She also felt very short now, looking up at her two hosts. So you asked to speak to us about someone named Sam who disappeared? What makes you think we would know anything about that? The male said. Well, you guys are aliens and you do abduct people, so it stands to reason you just might be able to tell me where he is. Pam tried to act natural as she maneuvered around behind the examination table to get it between herself and these oversized blondes. The female stuck her finger in her ear. Pam saw her lips move. Then the expression showed thoughts without changing. She pulled the finger out. Nope, no one named Sam or anything else has been here in the last 10 days. She crossed her arms as if trying to act calm. The male turned and looked at the female. She quickly turned and looked back. They both stared at each other as if in some kind of a long, drawn-out debate. When at last they turned their attention back to Pam, they both looked as if they had won this silent argument. The male said, "There have been a few visitors here lately, but none of them was named Sam, and none of them are still here, we think." Pam detected a bit of uncertainty. "You think?" "Yes, we think. No, we're sure. We have no one named Sam on board." The female looked pissed for not showing any emotions. Pam was trying to decide if she should believe them or not. She guessed she should go along with them since there was nothing she could do either way. "Then, could you put me in contact with someone who might know Mr. Cassavetes's whereabouts?" Pam could feel World Leader Pam speaking through her. "If you don't know what that means, go back and read The Bag Lost in Time." The two tall aliens looked at Pam and then each other. After a bit, the female said, "You want to speak to the ones that you call the Mantis people. They have a thing for your kind." With that, the two aliens turned and walked out the door. The Greys tried to squeeze in past them, causing quite a lot of pushing and shoving in the doorway. When the Greys were in the room and the Nordics away doing some very important task that didn't involve getting Pam back home, Pam felt just a bit uneasy. These things didn't look very human. Well, of course not. They're aliens. Pam looked around. It did make her feel just a bit taller now that she was looking down at her abductors. One of the Greys pointed at the table and held up the wand. Um, you're not going to do anything I will hate, are you?" Pam looked back up, bumping the table with her back. Pam backed up, bumping the table with her back. The Gray pointed to the table again and then aimed the wand at Pam. Pam decided to do as she was told or indicated or implied. She carefully got up onto the table, but stayed sitting up. The Gray pointed to the table and jabbed at her with the wand. Pam thought about saying something, but didn't know what. Rolling its eyes up at the ceiling, which looked very odd since the entire eye was black, the Gray finally waved the wand in the air around Pam. Pam suddenly felt her body go weak. She tried to move her hands, but it just hung there at her side. She tried to say something, but her mouth was on strike. Her body was lifted up off the table by some invisible force. This was just like when she was lifted from her bed, only now she could see what was going on. Pam watched as she drifted across the floor and straight at the door. As she got closer, she noticed her head was above the top of the opening. She tried to say something, but her mouth was still not working. She watched as the wall above the doorway got closer and closer. With stars in her eyes and a throbbing pain in her forehead, Pam watched as everything went dark. The inside of the closet looked just the way it had only a few minutes ago. Pam was relieved to be back home. The door swung open and she was levitated across the room towards her bed. There were 5 Greys standing around her bed looking at her. Pam couldn't turn or look around, but she was sure the Greys that had abducted her were still around her. Was it possible she had a concussion and she was seeing double? She was drifted over to her bed and then the wand was shut off. Pam fell onto her bed and landed on her face. She came up with a mouthful of sheet. She flipped over and watched the 4 Greys walk back into her closet and the door close. The other 5 remained standing around her. "Murph, murph, murph." Pam pulled the sheet out of her mouth. "Aren't you guys supposed to go with your buddies?" One of the Greys pulled out a wand and held it in the air. "Wait a minute, I just went through." Pam felt her body go limp. She was elevated into the air and once more drifted towards the closet. This time she made it through without bumping her head. It went dark, but Pam knew she wasn't unconscious. She'd been unconscious quite a few times in the past 7 months. She waited for the lights to come on. When they did, she wished it was still dark. With that, I am going to break. I'm going to pause right here so you all can wait and find out what happens to Pam next week in this exciting misadventure called The UFOs Attacked the Bag Company. Well, attacked the bag. Until next Saturday, or no, not Saturday, until next week, this is Chris James for Story Time.